Hi, everyone. Welcome to week 4. So this week, what we're working on is hopefully writing our rhetorical analysis drafts because we have our peer review coming up next week, and then our contextual analysis papers will be due shortly after that. So I wanted to show you a couple of slideshows that I'm sharing this week just to make sure you have information about how these should look. First of all, introductions and conclusions. These are the two things I probably get the most questions about from students. Basically, what you want to keep in mind is that your introduction should start with what we often call a hook, right? And then we want to make sure that we eventually get to the thesis statement in the introduction paragraph. A lot of readers are going to be skimming texts, and so they want to make sure that the information they're looking for is where they expect it to be. And so a lot of times people will just skip straight to the thesis to see what argument you're making. And so you want that to be at the bottom of your first paragraph, especially with this short of a paper. You just want to make sure it's in that spot so that your paper can be skimmed, okay? And don't forget, we do have a thesis formula for this paper. And so I would say go ahead and rely on that to write your thesis statement. In between, you might just want to have a sentence or two giving a little bit of background information on the topic, and then you can move on to your paragraphs. I have some advice for how to make sure you're avoiding cliches and things that typically don't work in introductions and conclusions. For example, dictionary definitions are often pretty cliche in an introduction. It's something that we're taught a lot in schools, in high school and things like that, to kind of use as a formula for writing an introduction. But since it's so common, it has just become kind of cliche. So you want to try to avoid doing that to make sure that your paper seems original, fresh, things like that. I have tips too for things that you want to include. So, it's good enough to know what to avoid, but I think it's harder to know what you should do. So I wanted to go ahead and add those. Some of the best things that you can do: add a quote from your documentary, add an interesting fact that you found as you were doing your research. That kind of stuff can be a great way to get the reader interested. Your conclusion is another really important part of the paper that I think tends to be overlooked, where people just don't really know how to end. They just repeat the thesis statement and then repeat their points. You don't want to do that. It is another thing that's taught as a formula. And the reason these things are taught is mostly so that we make it easier for you to get graded. Teachers have a lot of grading to do, and especially for things like tests, people who are paid to review tests have a lot of test grading to do. And so they make it as easy as possible for them to do that work. We're not doing that anymore. So you want to make sure that your conclusion feels original, feels fresh, feels insightful. What we're looking for in a conclusion, we are looking for a reworded thesis. You want to return to your central point, make sure that the reader is left knowing that information, what your argument was. And then what you want to do is you kind of zoom out of the paper. And that's why I have this triangle here, is that you're going from most specific, which is your thesis statement, to expanding. You want to talk about how the topic that you've discussed in your paper relates to other subjects, right? How does this expand to inform other conversations that we might be having? If you're writing about a documentary about a cult scam or conspiracy theory, for example, your conclusion might talk about how cults are more prevalent in conversations right now, how even though people dismiss cults as being of a different time, we see them in contemporary eras if you're writing about a contemporary cult. And so you know what I'm saying? It's like, how does the subject that you're talking about relate to our current moment? What do we need to take with us now that we've read your paper into the rest of our lives? Okay. Again, I have tips, things to avoid. You want to try not to say "in conclusion" when you're writing. You can always say that in a speech, I think. I don't teach speech. But I think when you speak, you can say it because that helps the reader know, or the listener know, to tune in again, because they know now that you're at the conclusion. But with writing, we can just tell it's the conclusion. We can see that. Things to include. Again, you can use a quote. A lot of the time, one of the best things you can do is link back to the introduction in some way. If you referred to something in the introduction, you can refer back to it in the conclusion. Kind of creates this nice cyclical feeling where we feel like it's kind of closed the text off, right? Yeah. Okay, then the next thing I talk about is topic sentences, and I give some examples for how you could write a topic sentence. Basically, your topic sentence is going to be the first sentence of your paragraph, and it's going to tell us what the main idea of the paragraph is. In other words, what the thesis statement of just that paragraph is. Again, some suggestions here. And then also transitions. Transitions, I think we tend to overthink. Maybe we're intimidated by them, but really all we're doing in a transition is trying to explain the relationship of one paragraph to the paragraph next to it that follows it, right? And so we're saying, I'm adding a new point, or I'm going to talk about the counter argument now, or I'm going to talk about more examples of ethos, or I'm going to, you want to just explain where you're going and, just put that into, instead of using first person, put that into some kind of academic sounding language, right? Helping the reader know, okay, we're moving now. Where are we moving to? All right, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up, but hopefully this slideshow has been helpful at helping you figure out how to write introductions and conclusions.